뭐뭐 하는 건 어때? How about ing? Also compare this with what about ing? Now, how about ing, like I said before, is very common for suggesting something. It can be general or specific. Generally, we just use it for suggesting. But what about can be used for suggesting, but it's also we're adding information, an additional point, or reminding about something. So let's say we saw something in the near past, maybe online when we were looking, then in that case, since we saw it recently, using what about can sound a little bit more casual and conversational here. What about that restaurant that we saw yesterday? Do you want to try that? Here, we're reminding and also referencing something that we saw in the recent past. So, what about? But you can also say, how about eating tteokbokki tonight? How about that restaurant? This just makes it a little more of a general suggestion. Now, our example. 이번 주말에 영화 보러 가는 건 어때? How about going to the movies this weekend? What about watching that movie that we saw the preview for last night? 이번 토요일에 소풍 가는 건 어때? What about having a picnic this Saturday? Now, what about has a slightly more specific nuance, like I said. Maybe we're reminding of something, but we can also use it in the same context as how about, what about. So it really depends on that context and situation and the person speaking. So they're both okay. However, 약간 다른의 뉘앙스 있긴 있어요. What about having a picnic this Saturday? What about one of those bouquets that looks like flowers, but is actually made of money? Here, what about is always going to have a slight upward intonation because it's a suggestion. What about? What about? What about one of those bouquets? Bouquets. Here, this is actually, I believe, a French word originally, so the spelling is a little bit strange. It gets pronounced a bit strange as well, like bouquet, something like this, but we say bouquet, bouquet. One of those bouquets that looks like flowers, that looks like. Here, that looks like 보다는 that looks like. That looks like. Make sure your that is short and blended. That looks like. Here, flowers. Stress on the first syllable, flowers. With a natural pause after for contrast, because but is here. When we're contrasting something, we can add emphasis by using a pause. But is actually, we're also emphasizing this contrast by putting more stress on actually, especially the first syllable. But is actually, here, don't say but is actually, but is. But is actually made of money? Made of money? Upward intonation because of our question. What about one of those bouquets that looks like flowers, but is actually made of money? Usually quickly or briefly, and this is neutral tone, so it can be formal and it can be informal. Now, I hear a lot of mistakes with favorite because it's a really common word that almost all English students know,